Thank you so much, Sybil, for introducing the SCALA program to our audience and for setting the stage really nicely for this exciting webinar. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Neha Rai, who is a climate change and private sector specialist at FAO with more than 15 years of experience working in climate adaptation, climate finance, and policy. She is currently working with the SCALA team based in Rome, focusing on private sector engagement in implementing national climate plans, and will be speaking to us on the role of private sector engagement and systems level approaches in scaling up climate ambition in the agriculture sector. Neha, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello everyone, and thanks for this opportunity. In my intervention, I will briefly touch upon how private sector actors can play a key role in building climate resilient value chains, ensuring a more systems level and gender responsive climate action approach. But before that, I think one of the most important things to bear in mind is the urgency and why there is a need for collective action by the private sector as well. IPCC report clearly allowed that we are in this red zone. We don't have time to lose. And although the report gives a rather grim picture, there is still hope if rapid and collective actions can be taken now in 2020s. Now, agri-food systems are a crucial part of the jigsaw to achieving this ambition. Hence, to win this race to climate change, it's imperative that we go all in and collaborate across both businesses and governments, taking more systems level approach to climate action. So what role can the private sector play? We know that changing weather and climatic conditions can affect businesses in different forms across the supply chains and the value chains. For example, in the supply of raw materials, interrupt the transport and logistics, damage infrastructure. So it would make business sense for companies to start employing sustainable practices to adapt better, not only in their current operations, but also in their value chains, particularly by also deploying gender inclusive practices to build resilience. I think the second thing worth mentioning is that a changing climate will also provide new and enhanced market opportunities by influencing demand for products and services. For example, at the input level, new types of seeds, new processing facilities that ensure humidity control, new types of transport. This would also mean identifying value chain opportunities for female or women smallholders beyond production level. The other thing which is worth mentioning is that private sector will be needed to finance across the value chains, and different actors in the value chain will have different types of financial needs. Some actors will need more seed money to invest in climate resilient inputs and R&D, while others will require low cost finance to shift to sustainable practices. Private investors can have a crucial participation in financing
Neha, I think you've become, yeah, okay, please carry on.
Did this happen just now? Because I was speaking.
Yeah, it was just now. Go ahead.
But I do hear echo, so I think other people would need to mute themselves, so I don't hear that.
Yes, could we please ask participants to keep themselves unmuted? You can type your questions or comments into the chat box.
So just to go back to the point on financing, private investors can have a crucial role in financing climate action by identifying multiple entry points along the value chains. And given that there is a need for a large scale of finance, and we know that less than 1% of total private finance goes to agriculture and other sectors, in comparison to energy and transport, it's time for financiers to step up. Having said that, de-risking is needed and enabling environment for private sectors actors is needed to step up. Now, before we listen more from our colleagues here from their country experiences as well as methodologies on how they're using value chain approaches, it's worth mentioning about why we should take a systems lens to building resilience. We know food systems are complex. They're affected by diverse interrelated drivers, for example, climate change being one. Systems approach helps us to consider systems in their entirety and work across organizational and stakeholder boundaries. A value chain approach is an appropriate systems level approach to strengthen climate resilience, as it recognizes climate change affects more than a company's assets, but also impacts and looks at climate risks to women, smallholder farmers, local communities, and natural environments. Hence, all the actors in the food system need to commit to be actively involved and collaborate. If you look at the value chain of a regular agriculture value chain, this is what it would look like in principle. So when we're looking at a systems lens to building climate resilience, climate change will affect different actors in across the value chain and have knock-on effect if one actor is affected in the value chain. So value chain approach is really helpful in analyzing climate risks, vulnerabilities, and hotspots across all stages of a value chain. It's also important that not only assessment of risks is crucial, but also a value chain approach can help in managing risks. For example, a recent Oxfam and a BSR report showed that companies usually spend approximately around 1 trillion a year managing risks across their value chains. So value chain management can be useful to manage climate risks since this approach goes beyond corporate operations. And it's worth highlighting that since so much is being spent already in this area, why not integrate climate risk management within the value chain management of businesses? I just wanted to share a few examples here of companies who are already stepping up and strengthening their supply chain. And there are 2-3 ways of doing this, and companies are investing in certain models. This is based on a review of companies' initiatives in climate action with the FAO Investment Center, where we've come across a few types of business models or approaches companies are taking to build resilient value chains. And when you look at the global companies, there are 4 different types of approaches that the companies are using. One, they're investing in helping small farmers assess climate impacts and develop strategies, which are adaptation strategies with farmers. So for example, companies like Green Mountain Roaster Coffee, which was a small cafe a long time ago, engages with farmer organizations to help assess impacts and prepare adaptation strategies. The second type of approach you see is they're setting up more concrete partnerships throughout the value chain. For example, Bayer is a global collaboration with farmers that center on innovative crop solutions, and has services across the value chain. The third type of approach you see is companies are setting up standards to ensure sustainable practices along the value chain. For example, Starbucks is investing in farmers' efforts, specifically coffee growers, to demonstrate abiding to certain standards like conserving water resources, soil resources, biological diversity, and ecosystem functions. And the fourth type of approach you see is companies are setting up their own impact assessment funds, where funds like Livelihoods Fund is a fund created by a few set of companies like Danone, Mars, Veolia, to foster more sustainability and poverty reduction in supply chains, particularly focusing on specific commodities like vanilla supply chains in Madagascar. Within
Could I
countries,
please ask you to kindly wrap up soon?
yes,
Thank
just
you.
1 minute and I'll be done.
Thanks.
Within countries, I think the approach is slightly different, where there's more focus on capacity building of farmers for resilient value chains. For example, in Nepal, 2 sugar mills are investing in, like Golcha Industries is investing in building capacities of farmers to engage in climate resilient sugarcane farming, like, for example, planting stress tolerant seeds, mulching for soil retention, etc. And similarly, in Uganda, Equator Seeds is working throughout the value chain by investing in processing and marketing of climate resilient seed varieties. So we see some efforts are happening, but it's not scaling up to the level we need. And also, these are just one-off examples which are popping up. Of course, we need more efforts from the private sector to take some efforts in this direction, but it's not at the scale as we would expect for the NDCs to reach their ambition. And de-risking is needed so that the private sector can come in. Now, SCALA, as Sybil already highlighted, is doing something in this direction to de-risk the private sector. And private sector engagement is a key component of the program. For example, it will work with companies to make their value chains more resilient, but also work with governments to de-risk the private sector and enable investments in building resilient value chains. To further these interests, we will be partnering with organizations like World Business Council for Sustainable Development and also complement the private sector strategies of FAO and UNDP. But I think I'll stop there, and I've already got a warning from my moderator here. And we'll hear a bit more from our colleagues from countries who are using these value chain approaches and methodologies. And I look forward to this exciting experience of countries from other examples. Thank you very much.